Hello and welcome everyone to our next session in CME Palooza Fall 2016. I am Scott Kober, the co-producer of CME Palooza, and I would like to welcome you to this session, which is entitled Bringing Innovation to the Annual Conference Floor. And this session is sponsored by Helio.com Education Lab. So I would first like to thank all the sponsors of CME Palooza Fall, our gold sponsor Genentech, our silver sponsors Helio Education Lab, Global Academy for Medical Education, Forefront Collaborative, CME Matters, and ASIM. And then our bronze sponsors, Vindigo Medical Education, Thistle Editorial, RMEI, PVI, Primary Care Network, Platform Q Health Education, Paradigm Medical Communications, MyCME Haymarket Medical Education, Connective, Impact Education, I3 Health, Highmark CE, Ethos CE, CMEology, Clinical Care Options, and ACHL. So we're certainly thankful to all of our sponsors, and we encourage everyone watching this to kind of to go to our sponsor tab either after the session or in the coming days to kind of get a better sense of who some of our sponsors are. So as with all of our CME Palooza Fall sessions, there are three ways to ask questions during this session. So you can click on the Google Slides link that is found on our live page. I pasted the URL here in this slide, but it's probably easier. So right above where you're viewing this on the live page, you can click on that link. You can use our Google text line to send in a question. The number is 267-666-0CME, so that's 0263. Or you could tweet your question to us using the CME Palooza hashtag, or you could just tweet something pithy and funny or interesting about CME Palooza. We're always happy to see us pop up in the Twitter feed. So just as a speaker disclosure, so just be aware that the opinions and discussions expressed by our panel today do not necessarily represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, parent company, or affiliates. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Ann Gruppe. Ann is the Director of CE Education, Science, and Professional Development at the American Society of Clinical Oncology.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. And thanks to everybody for joining us this afternoon. We're going to start with a quick round of introductions and then get right into the agenda. So Janice, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Anne. Appreciate it. So welcome, everyone, and good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. I'm Janice Sibley. I have the privilege of being the Vice President for the Education Division at the American College of Cardiology. And most of you may have heard of it. It's a very large organization, obviously focused on cardiology. We do have about 53,000 members. Those members are mostly cardiovascular specialists, mostly physicians, but we also have several care team members. Our mission is quite broad, but it is very much based in education. And actually that was how the college was founded, was to become an educational front for continuing medical education. We are based in Washington, D.C., and that's where I am presenting from today. So thank you.
Great, thanks. And Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Smith. I'm with the American College of Radiology. We are located here in Reston, Virginia. Thank you for inviting me to speak. This is a really great opportunity. Just a little bit about the college. We're about 38,000 members. Radiologists, radiation oncologists, medical physicists mostly make up our membership. We have a mission, core purpose that is to serve patients and society. And so that's really our mission. Of course, we have some core areas which encompass research, education, clinical education, quality and safety, health economics, policy, and things such as that. And I'm excited to be here and to talk about innovation and education with everyone. So thank you.
Great, thanks. And then my third panelist is right here in the room with me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Greaves. I'm the Division Director for Educational Meetings at the American Society of Clinical Oncology, ASCO. ASCO has about 40,000 members. And while we are the American Society of Clinical Oncology, our member base includes about a third international members. And the core of our membership works in medical oncology, but we actually have a strong member and audience base across disciplines and professions within the broad strokes of cancer care. The organization's mission is to conquer cancer through research, education, and provision of the highest quality of patient care. And we we'll talk more, I'm sure, about the full portfolio of meetings across our organizations. But
absolutely, yeah. So I will admit right out of the gate that even though the title is bringing innovation to the annual conference floor, we actually wanted to bend the rules a little bit and talk about innovation and educational meetings from a much broader perspective, because we know that not everybody listening in has an annual conference. Those tend to happen a lot of times within medical specialty societies. So if you work for a medical education company or a university, we wanted to make this session relevant to you as well. And the reality is that innovation doesn't just happen at the annual meeting. Innovation should be happening across the education portfolio. And so even though we're going to be focusing on meetings, we hope to provide a diversity of examples for you that we hope you can take away and make some connection points with your own portfolios. So to start off, as we were having our planning discussions about this session, where we really started was with this question of what drives innovation in the first place. What are some of the motivators, whether they be internal or external, that really make the environment ripe for innovation? And then how do you do innovation so that you're not doing it just because it's the new gimmick or the new hot thing? How do you know that you're actually bringing additional value, additional meaning for your learners? So I wanted to kick off, and we can either go around each of you in turn, or you guys can jump in together. But what are some of the factors that you all consider when you're thinking about innovations?
So Anne, I'll jump in first just to say, from a very high level, I think that question of why we innovate is a great one, because we get pressures from all kinds of folks to do things differently, to innovate. So we have internally here just a little driver that we use to help with the why of innovation. And it's sort of our handy little internal education mantra in the meetings team, which is that we strive to make our committees be better planners, to make our faculty be better educators, and to make our attendees be better learners. And that sort of is a foundational principle that we use when we look at some of the things, whether it's internal or external pressure to do things differently, that we can ask, are we making headway in achieving those goals? Mm-hmm. And I think that's been really helpful for staff to sort of focus on those key principles.
Yeah. Lisa, it's very interesting to hear you say that, because we too at the ACC find that our innovation is people driven. Oftentimes the first thing that comes to mind when you think of innovation is technology, and technology does play, in our case, a big part in innovation, but it's not really the driver. The driver for us are our members and how they are learning, how they are delivering education, particularly what problems are they having with doing that. So we look very often to observe situations where what we thought was going to happen with learning may not be happening as much as we would like to see it, or are there different ways that we could improve and make more efficient the learning experience, whether it's on an individual basis or whether it's in a group setting, and that can be small or large, of course. So really our innovation is driven by people, and particularly by our members.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. Here at ACR, we're the same. We actually have even set up something called an innovation fund. And that's available to our members and also available to staff. And so it's definitely driven by people. Also, it's driven by processes, I think, as well. As you pointed out, Janice, innovation isn't always technology. It can be processes. It's also about building trust and setting high standards and goals. And so I think that those are some of the areas that we look at when we're looking to build on innovation here.
That's great. Well, and I love that you brought up that point. I'm going to jump in on that point that you made, Carrie, because I think people's initial gut reaction when you talk about innovation is technology, is the new app, the new website, the new ARS system. And so I'm actually, we can talk about that a little bit, but I'd be really curious to hear some examples from you all about, what your decision points are in terms of high tech versus low tech, and what your measures of success look like when you put in an innovation.
So we can, at the ACC, one of the things that we look at, we try not to start with technology. It can be, as I think all of us have said, part of the solution, but what we tend to do is figure out what the problem is and how we could potentially solve it, oftentimes trying to go to a low-tech solution first. So as an example, we have found oftentimes that innovating the way that you are setting a classroom or a meeting session room makes a huge difference, or the way that you are even structuring a poster abstract presentation or a section within your annual meeting makes a big difference. And we have recently, I think, innovated very successfully our poster abstract area by combining the opportunity for small theaters where oral posters are presented within a particular clinical area of cardiology. So let's choose heart failure. We have a small area where there's a little theater and there are oral presentations going on. And at the same time, the paper or the paper-based posters are surrounding that theater. So it creates a little hub, which is an innovation, pretty low tech, but it has, what we found is that it has encouraged interaction and has also provided an opportunity for someone to learn from an abstract in different ways. They can be a more passive learner listening to a presentation, or they can be more actively involved in a discussion standing next to a paper poster. So that, for me, is a good example of not really using technology, but just thinking through a solution to a learning problem that will make learning more efficient or effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty much the same in terms of looking at low tech when you're talking about setting rooms in certain ways. Also having the content to drive how we are going to have those actions and interventions take place. I know that one of the things I initially brought up was talking about building trust and leading to innovation. One of the sessions that we do at our annual meeting is about missed opportunities, mistakes, and values and lessons learned. And we actually have experts that talk about those things. And that actually brings people together and leads to more interaction and people having discussions in the room, and just having that even funnel outside of the meeting space where they can continue that conversation.
An interesting thing with posters, Janice, as you were talking, it made me think about this, that a number of years ago, we started doing, because at our meetings, poster walks are very popular, but of course we're reaching a small percentage of people. So we started an audio poster tour program where we would have experts, and I know many other organizations do this, where we would have experts record information about a number of posters, and people could wear the headsets like they're in the museum and all of that kind of stuff. And our goal was to broaden the reach, right? Because we wanted to bring that expert analysis. And ultimately, we stopped doing them. And the reason we stopped doing them was, while it expanded the reach in terms of the education, what it didn't do was facilitate the interaction with the presenters. And so we had a technology-based solution that met the goal of extending the reach, but ultimately the value point in the posters is the engagement and interaction. And ultimately, we think that's what helps cement the learning. And so more people were getting information, but we didn't really feel that we were improving the outcomes we were looking for, and we stopped doing that.
That's awesome. Very interesting. We actually have had similar experiences with our annual meeting and have tried the audio poster. We do still do some of them, but have not, have determined that that's really not a complete solution for us, and does not in itself create an innovative way to engage learners. I agree with you. Another thing that I think, Carrie, you sort of hit on, which I thought was so interesting, and it was a real learning for us, was that oftentimes I think we try to structure innovation too much. And we learned that a couple of years ago through a highly successful series of educational sessions, which were just called Learn with the Masters. And they were nothing more than putting a cardiology legend, so to speak, someone who was very famous and had really accomplished a great deal in his or her life as a cardiologist, putting that person in a smaller room with, sort of a round theater in the round type of thing, where you could just have the audience ask them questions. And we found some of the most innovative and engaging learning occurring with the opportunity just to be near someone who would have so much wisdom that could be imparted. No formal presentations, no technology. Again, it was just the opportunity to learn in a different way.
Yeah. Absolutely. At our smaller meetings, we do something called Lunch with the Experts. So people are able to sit at the table and learn from the experts and really pick their brain and ask them questions during that time. So we found that that's been, a very great opportunity for our learners, and they all walk away with so much from that experience.
Yeah, that's interesting, Carrie. We do that as well. I was going to mention too, another thing that we struggle with, and it gets to the sort of the engagement of many versus things that only reach a few people. So we've expanded sort of that concept to actually do something on a more mentoring level, which is, an expert office hours that's one-on-one. And obviously we reach very few people with that. We have the broader reach with the networking rounds kind of concept. But those have been so great, and we see those as a value for the field. So it's a value for the attendees, but also that opportunity for our attendees at meetings to connect with the biggest names in the field and get one-on-one mentoring really is an opportunity to cement those people's interest and engagement in the field, which has additional outcomes outside of the learning goals.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
So Anne, we've got a question that came that sort of fits into this topic, so I thought I would chime in. So this came in our text line, so I'm reading it off my phone. So do your members get to weigh in with their learning preferences for certain types of education needs, for instance, skill development?
Yeah, so I can answer on behalf of the ACC first. So we do have a lot of member involvement in the development of content for the meeting. In fact, our members are our presenters. They are really, they work hand in hand with us on the design of all of our activities for education, whether they're live or digital. And, we don't so much anymore ask them up front about learning preferences. More so, we actually try to offer multiple types of learning or formats so that they can choose on the fly. And so an example of that, at an annual meeting, clearly you could offer many different types of learning formats: self-paced, large group, small group, formalized, less formalized. But at smaller activities, we try very much to blend the formats that we use, and thus giving, again, the learners the opportunity to participate in a group setting or learn later on their own by accessing the same content online, etc. So rather than asking them for their preferences, because we have discovered that oftentimes they will say one thing and do another, or they will not really know what they prefer until they're in the situation, we try to just offer multiple types of learning formats and so that they can choose preferences on the fly.
So a follow-up question that came in. So for your less formal educational interventions, such as your lunch with the experts, how much time is spent, if any, in faculty training for those sorts of things?
Well, actually, we offer a faculty development course. We've done that for a couple of years now. And so our faculty development course is about 1.5 to 2 days long. And we'll bring in subject matter experts that typically serve as faculty, either for our live sessions or live meetings, and for also our e-learning and enduring products. So I think that our faculty are, familiar with and know adult learning principles, and they try to implement that even at a small group discussion when they're talking. I'm trying to gauge their small group to see where are they going, what is their level, trying to kind of shape what that conversation is going to be with them. So when they walk away from even that lunch or the office hours, as Lisa had pointed out, that they walk away with having a valuable experience, and it wasn't just, kind of sitting around and just chatting and having lunch, but it actually adds value to their practice when they go back into the office.
Yeah. Carrie, I think that's so interesting too, and I'm glad to hear that you have success with the faculty development. We have various outreach and programs for faculty development, but I think one of the challenges is that, to just be frank, every faculty member thinks faculty development and training is for the other guy. So we do work in an area where the experts that we invite to participate don't always recognize where their expertise in content knowledge versus their expertise as educators differs. So that's definitely an area, and actually to the question that was asked, that's an area that we've actually applied some additional focus to. Is I think we had a little bit of a naive assumption that for some of the more networking, less formal activities that we didn't need to give the same level of instruction to faculty, because we wanted it to be more Google Hangout and more, just go with it. But I think we've started to learn that we need to do a better job of setting the expectations, not the agenda for what needs to happen, but the approach and the goals and objectives. And it's something that we put a new focus on over the past year.
Yeah. That's good. So I'll jump in if there are no more questions right now, Scott, is to ask about, you all have hinted at kind of measures of success and trying to improve the value of the educational experience, but are there metrics that make that more concrete for you all and dare I say measurable so that then, as you're putting in place some of these innovations, you can determine in a more objective way versus just the anecdotes from your attendees whether or not those innovations are really successful?
For ACR, we actually have a couple groups that will review our feedback from the evaluations that come in. So if we're talking about the annual meeting, we have our program committee, and they will actually go in and we provide them with an in-depth summary that we've worked on, and that includes even the open-ended comment section. But we also have a measurements and evaluation subcommittee that reviews all of our activities. So they're able to do a deep dive, and they do this quarterly. So they go in and they take a look at all of the evaluation feedback, whether it's coming back from live offerings, enduring products, anything that we're doing that has educational value. And they make recommendations to the program managers, to the subject matter experts, to the program chairs about their programs. And they actually do weigh in on changes that should be facilitated for a program, if something should perhaps be sunsetted or retired, or if there are just general improvements that can be made. And we found this to be very, very valuable, and as you said, objective, and in terms of our review, because oftentimes if you have staff or if you have a faculty member or a subject matter expert reviewing their own activities, sometimes they could be a little biased about it. So I think having that outside.
Yeah, I think, we have some similar systems in terms of review of the feedback that we get. I think where we struggle a lot as an organization, and I think we all have this to some degree, is the you know, our goal in outcomes is improved patient care. And it is just so hard to not only measure whether our interventions have any impact, but a direct impact, really getting to, you know, are we making progress? So I feel like where we have great innovations, we also have a fundamental problem that we've had for a long time, which is separating out attendee satisfaction, which matters. Let's face it, people have to want to come to our meetings and they have to find value. Sort of separating out the metrics that we have for satisfaction, engagement, even self-assessment of knowledge and impact from, you know, did the intervention really work? And I think that's a struggle for all of us that's very real.
I totally agree. I know that patient care is definitely difficult for us working with radiologists, because obviously that's not, you know, hands-on with the patient. So that's particularly hard for us to measure.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, you know, as I hear both of you speak, and I'm in agreement with what you're saying, you know, the you know, goals, what we really are trying to accomplish, which is in our case, improving heart health. You know, it's very hard to make direct connections between, was it the education that did it, or was it a combination of different factors? We have kind of an interesting system, very at the very micro level, which would be per activity, whether it's live or digital. We actually, in our process, our cyclical process of designing and delivering and then evaluating our education, we start off with a set of criteria which have actually been created by our members. We have a member group known as the Education Standards and Outcomes Committee, and they have specified these 6 criteria, which are things like, you know, is there an opportunity for engagement in a proposed learning activity? Is there the target audience? Are we going for knowledge or skills, competence, et cetera, types of gains? And then those criteria are actually used to evaluate whether or not an activity is even moved forward to be designed and delivered. And then those same criteria are used on the back end to evaluate the individual activity to see whether or not it met the goals that were outlined in the beginning. And there are, in fact, also in many cases, financial goals, which, you know, whether it's a goal of getting a certain number of participants, or whether it's a goal of achieving a certain amount of revenue, which will then be pulled back into our mission-based projects, et cetera. Those criteria we try to use throughout. So the benefit of that is it does help our member leaders and staff to be aligned with sort of the North Star where we're trying to go in each activity, and it helps us sort of have that measurement throughout. The other thing that we are doing, just really beginning to do now, which we're hoping will get us closer to that larger set of goals, a little more elusive to reach, is to issue an annual report, which is across all of our learning activities, that measures things beyond just learning. So clearly, you know, learning, gaining knowledge, gaining skills, et cetera, is something that we can measure fairly easily through different types of mechanisms, but measuring things like, were we responsive to the environment? So if there was a change in the science, for example, you know, did we teach to the new science, and were we effective in engaging our learners in the new science related to some cardiovascular issue? Again, finance is another one there. Did we meet our financial goals and our reach goals in terms of spreading information across the group, the large number of people that we need to reach? And then finally, the one that's the most elusive is this performance in practice, which I think, Lisa, both you and Carrie sort of alluded to, that we do have our clinical registries, and we are working right now to try to link performance-based data, which is what the registries collect, with some sort of interaction that happened through education. That's elusive because it's hard for you to prove causation, right? But we are trying to at least show data that may show that over the course of a year, 18 months, if we hit a particular topic, such as a change in a clinical guideline very heavily in our educational curriculum, did we begin to see changes in the behavior of our clinicians as they were entering data into the registry. You know, not causation, but certainly might be an indicator that we are making a difference.
That's really interesting. You know, when you're talking about the success metrics, I think one of the things that we've done in a similar way that has been successful as we've advanced we have a number of new meetings that have happened over the past couple of years. And one of the things that we've done in terms of our presentations to the board of directors is to include, we've always had financial success metrics that are spelled out, but we've added a lot of success metrics that align with board objectives and with how we structure our education, so that when we're doing a multidisciplinary conference, that we build in what are the disciplines we want to reach, what are the target audience goals for those disciplines, same with interprofessional education, so that we're making those things much more strategic and measurable and documented. Yeah.
All right, so here's another question that came in. This just came in over Twitter, and maybe you can kind of each go around and talk about, and I know that we're going to get to this a little later, but maybe talk now about what do you think your most innovative program is, and with that program, was it as attractive or less attractive to your early career learners versus your late career, 20 plus years in the profession learners?
So I'm happy to start. I'm not sure that I could peg this as being the most single-handed innovative program, but it is one of the programs that I consider innovative. We have recently begun to use clinical simulation which is a virtual-based simulation, so it's much less expensive than what you may have seen, which is the mannequin or the model on a gurney. We've begin to use that to present a clinical scenario and then to have the learner in small groups work through the workup and the diagnosis of the virtual patient, and then actually even do prescribe tests, prescribe drugs, prescribe a management protocol. The reason we believe this is innovative is not because of the technology, but because what we've been able to do is to use it to not only assess whether someone is performing according to what our clinical guidelines say they should be doing as they work through a patient case, but we also have been able to use it to assess transfer of knowledge into a performance-based setting. And we've done some interesting things. This is literally happening as we speak at some of our meetings this fall, where we are even infusing educational gaming in the form of a competition where we put two teams together, each team surrounding a virtual patient, and they are given that patient, do not know what the presentation is ahead of time, and they need to work through the presentation, and on the back end, the report out shows how often they performed something that was critical or essential, how often they ordered a test that maybe was not critical for this patient's workup, et cetera, and using that sort of a competition format to create a gaming atmosphere for an audience who's watching these two teams compete. So that's an example of something that we're doing now, which I think is quite innovative.
Yeah. That's great. I think, again, that's a hard question. I feel like we have dispersed a lot of innovation versus having a big innovation program. But one of the things that comes to mind is we're really making a fundamental shift in the value that we want to derive from questions that are asked during sessions. So we've moved recently to, we have an eQ&A system like many of us do, and we've recently moved to have that be a crowdsourced system where people can vote questions up and down. And that small innovation really helped to drive moderators having a better idea of what was important to the crowd and doing a better job of really addressing the needs that are in the audience. So that was wonderful. We've seen that attendees are asking better questions because they don't all ask the same question, and things that aren't relevant get voted down. So that's great in the room. But what we're doing is really building on that, because that is real-time needs assessment. And we want to leverage the knowledge that comes from that experience to be able to help with our program planning. And we also want to use what we're learning from that to help reinforce knowledge. So, for instance, we'll take the questions that were asked and have different channels for reinforcement of learning through content that goes out. And then we take the questions that weren't asked but had a high degree of interest, and we'll have blog posts and resources on those. And then we take all of that to funnel it back into the planning process. And we're working on actually taking that information to connect with ASCO University, which is our digital learning platform, to be able to cross-link what we're learning, not just from the questions, but the context of the questions, for sort of a blended learning approach. So to really take something that's intended for the conduct of the session and make that be a much bigger resource that helps us understand needs.
I think for us, as you guys pointed out, there are a lot of programs, but one that stands out for us, I think, is really our Education Center. And that's located here in Reston, Virginia. So we have many fellowships, and we offer about 14 of those throughout the year, and there are 49 of the actual courses, but there are 49 different ones. It's a very hands-on center. And it really simulates what the radiologist sees when they're in practice. So they go in and they're able to sit at a system that is just like their practice, using sometimes the same software that is used in their practice. And we're able to use multiple vendors for that. So I think that for us, this is innovative, not just from a technology standpoint, because they're working their way through cases during their time there, and it's usually about 3 days or so. And they have to complete a certain number of cases, and they receive a certificate of proficiency at the end, depending on how many cases they've responded to. But the other part of this is the faculty interaction. So there's a very low student to faculty ratio at the Ed Center, and so we allow for less than 50 participants for the courses, and then we usually will have about 4 or 5 faculty for those courses. So it's very individualized. So they're not just getting the simulation of their workstation, but they're getting the didactic, they're getting the hands-on, and they're also getting that individual attention from an expert as well.
Scott, if you go to the slides that I have, one of the slides, I believe it might be about slide 4, shows a mobile phone. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yes. This is what Lisa was describing just a few minutes ago. You can see on the screen, we do this also, that we link this technology, and there are several groups that do this out there, but if you look closely, you can see questions on the mobile phone that are being upvoted based on how many people are saying, yeah, I like that question, I'm interested in that also. And what's very interesting, which I love what both Lisa and Carrie are saying, is that the data that are captured from this can be turned into all sorts of useful, to be used for all sorts of useful purposes, one of which is needs assessment, content planning, etc., and really does help to increase engagement. We link that data back to our learning content management system. That piece is a little bit technologically more sophisticated, but the actual cell phone having sort of an audience response and polling system is really pretty simple. And if you go to the very next slide, what I wanted to share with you is the interesting thing is we did this at our annual session this past year. We piloted 6 of these sessions where we provided sort of simultaneous dual CME and MOC credit, and it was through the use of this input, this system, where we were able to engage our audience. The data that we analyzed afterwards showed a 3-fold increase in engagement of individuals in rooms where we offered this special system over rooms where we did not. So, as Lisa's saying, that data are just like gold and can be mined for all sorts of different uses.
Janice, I'm going to use your data in some of my presentations.
Great.
So here's another question that just came in, which I think is also interesting. So certainly both ACC and ASCO and maybe even ACR, I'm really not sure, have large international memberships and a large international contingent who attend not only your annual conference, but some of your enduring activities and such. So how does that impact the depth and breadth of innovation that you're able to introduce into those either live or enduring settings?
It's an interesting question. I think in terms of impact, so we are doing one large annual meeting domestically here in the United States, and we just this year have begun a series of regional meetings in different areas of the world, which are conference-like. They're 2-3 day meetings where we have posters and learning sessions, etc. I don't know that I would say that the venue that we're using is impacted so much. Again, we are trying to create innovation that makes learning more efficient, and whether the learning is being conducted in Spanish or in Arabic, or whether the learning is, done in a small group or a large group, I think the same sorts of principles apply. So I don't know that we've thought about it necessarily like that, where there are differences. We again try to approach the any learning situation by looking at the specific target audience and then understanding what would be a great way to engage them and what do we have available to us. And sometimes, again, technology is not as available in certain areas as it is in others. Lisa, I don't know if you've had any experience.
So I think what I would say in that regard is that from our planning processes, and this doesn't necessarily get into specific innovation, but I would say that we have had a concerted effort to take a global mindset to our content development, as well as to the inclusion of faculty and perspectives. So I think that for our annual meeting, we have 50% of our attendance from outside the US. And clearly many of those attendees are pharma funded to come to our meeting. And every year we say, this is the year they're going to stop coming. And it hasn't happened yet. But I think that, with the engagement of the international community, we want to ensure that when we're teaching to a global audience of domestic and international attendees, that we appropriately represent the issues and perspectives that exist in that global environment. And we also have, as our organizations do, we have a lot of international programs that are overseas. Those tend to be smaller, more workshop oriented and specific to regional needs in country. But in terms of the innovation or scaling or changes, we don't really do anything specifically different outside of provide attendee services. And we have a huge focus on those attendee services, but not really in terms of systems or technology.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a really good point about the planning process. And in fact, a meeting we just did a couple weeks ago in Mexico City, 50% of our planning team was an in-country or in-region planning team. And they actually led the development of the content. That's very important.
Yes.
This is interesting because we've just changed our format for our annual meeting. So our annual meeting is still new. This will be our third year in 2017 that we're offering it this way. So I appreciate these comments because we have a relatively small international audience that attends our meeting. So looking at it from these perspectives will be interesting as we start to look at, working on making that grow. We do offer some international workshops and courses, as you mentioned, particularly with, we just started with the Education Center, as I talked about previously. And so we're able to take some of that innovation and technology overseas. But as you mentioned, Janice, we work with the people that are there to plan and develop the course to make sure that we are reaching the target audience for those audiences.
And actually, I should mention as well, and I feel bad for leaving this off, we have a program called our IDEA program. And this is a really great program where people can apply, and there's various criteria to come from international programs to be funded to come to our meeting. And not only do they get sort of a mentor guide for the meeting, they're also taken on tours of cancer centers, and they sort of get a deeper dive into the annual meeting and the U.S. system of medicine. So we do have a huge amount of international programs. That one intersects with the annual meeting. Is a great program.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, and I wanted to get back to the second part of Scott's last question, which kind of plays into this. We talked about, is there a U.S. versus international divide, but also is there any, there was that question around generational differences, and do different generations approach innovation differently?
So just to respond, thank you for reminding us about that part of the question. I will tell you the experience that we've had here at ACC, and I don't know if it is unique from others, but in terms of the use of technology in a session or using technology for innovating a session, we have actually not seen a whole lot of difference. We see great embracement from the younger generations, but we also see a lot of interest and willingness to embrace from our more seasoned faculty, from our more seasoned attendees. So we've been pleasantly surprised by that. I think oftentimes we find that just the novelty sometimes of an innovation, if it's technologically based, does draw a crowd in. What we have seen, and this sort of links to some of the discussion earlier on with faculty development, we also do have a large faculty development effort that goes on at the college, and we have seen more reticence to change the way that information is delivered in a learning situation by our more seasoned faculty. And I think it's not any more in my mind than perhaps the need for them to be convinced that there indeed will be a better learning experience by them making a change. And so what we have noticed is in our faculty development efforts, oftentimes it is the emerging early career younger faculty who are willing to jump in with both feet to test something like the simulation I was describing. And then as that becomes more successful, some of our more seasoned faculty then develop an interest in also developing their skill sets in those areas.
I think we've seen some of the same, and we also use our young physicians group to help with the planning of our annual meeting. So they actually have a seat at the table as we start looking at different sessions and the flow of the program, different innovations and technologies that should be included. But I think we've seen the same as Janice, that, in terms of technology at the meeting, that's being embraced by all generations.
I would agree with that as well. I think the one place where, and again, this is anecdotal, not systematic, I think in terms of technology adoption, it's pretty across the board. I will say that in terms of social media comfort, that is a place where we've seen some generational differences in terms of the value of social media for learning and content curation. And that's an area where we have seen some difference in terms of some of the younger folks having that built into their DNA as a place to evaluate, to obtain and evaluate content in a way that I think is generationally a little bit different.
Very cool. Thank you. I want to make sure, I know we're just about wrapping up, so we can leave a few minutes for questions, but I would be remiss if we did not talk about failure. Because if all of our innovations were successes, then that means that we were not pushing the envelope far enough. So, so I wonder if you all would talk a little bit just about, where risk plays into innovation, and but maybe share where you pushed that envelope right off the edge.
Well, I have a dismal failure I'm happy to talk about. And I'm getting a bit of an echo. I hope that doesn't continue, but we'll try. There we go. That works, Simsy. So a few years back at our annual meeting, we wanted to jump on the bandwagon of the YouTube videos and thought what a great idea it would be to solicit attendees at the meeting to submit questions that would be answered by our faculty up on stage, but they would submit using the YouTube video, and they would basically put their phone up next to them and tape themselves asking the question, and then they would receive this wonderful limelight of being up on the big screen in front of 3,000 people. Well, we hoped that the questions would come in, and they didn't. We tried to stage it at the meeting by actually trying to pull volunteers aside, and we even went to the younger generation. And to an absolute T, not a single person was really willing to put their face up on a screen in front of that many people. So it was, I think, a situation where we had not thought through what the value of that learning was. We were more enamored with the technology than we were with some sort of efficiency or additional engagement that would be created from the learning. So that was a complete failure. We have not done it since. I will end, though, with we have also had other failures, which were failures, we think, because it was a little bit too novel too soon. And we have seen that happen where we'll introduce something, it fails, but 4 years later, it comes back in maybe just a slightly modified form, and it's a huge success. So timing is a lot with these innovations, and the willingness of our audience to engage in them.
Oh, Janice, I think you're speaking my language with timing is everything. And I think also, and I can share an ASCO failure that was use of the right technology in the wrong way. I think we just didn't think through the whole value chain because it was when everything suddenly had a scan code on it and everybody wanted to be able to go and scan and get information. So we implemented a system for putting scan codes on all the posters, and they linked to the posters online, and what people really wanted was the abstract, and they couldn't get to the abstract from the poster, and they didn't know what they were getting when they scanned, and everybody was mad at us, and it was a great example of implementing a technology without really thinking through what the attendees needed.
Yeah, I think ours comes from, I had noted our education center and how successful it is here. We tried to move our education center over to our annual meeting and do that, and that did not go as well as we thought that it would. And like you said, sometimes it's just thinking through the value proposition and what that looks like. And we still don't quite understand why it works so well here, but it just didn't seem to translate that well when we tried to put it on site. So it could be timing, it could just be, there's so many other things that are available. We're still not quite sure, but that's something that we decided not to do again.
All right. Well, terrific. I think we're just about at a time, and I know that you guys had created several slides to show, but I think it shows the value of this session and all the great discussion that we didn't really have to rely on them, which is really great. And I think you guys talked about a lot of interesting things, and I always love learning from failures. I think people sometimes are a little bit too shy about sharing things that didn't work for them. So I'm glad that you guys were able to share some of those experiences. So for folks who are watching this live, if you could, or if you're watching this after the fact on our archive, if you could please go on the live page, there is a link at the bottom underneath the videos to a brief survey to get a sense of who's watching CME Palooza, which sessions you watched, what you thought of CME Palooza, sort of our outcome survey. So it's only about 7 questions, should take about 2 or 3 minutes total, but that feedback always helps us plan for the future. And for those folks who are watching this live, our next session will start here in about 5 minutes, so at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So once this session is done, you'll just need to refresh your browser at the start of that session, and you'll be all set. So with that, I want to thank everyone on our panel today. So I want to thank Anne for leading this wonderful session, and Lisa and Janice and Carrie for joining us. And with that, we will sign off for this session. So thank you all very much, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.